Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Carlotta Besozzi. I'm the director of Civil Society Europe, and I would like to welcome to this policy debate around the vision of the European political parties on the role for civil society in protecting European democracy. As you know, democracy is discussion around democracy are quite a hot topic for the moment. There is a Eurobarometer survey that shows that democracy is a core value for EU citizens that want to see it defended in the next European Parliament elections. And we have seen also discussions around the defense of democracy, in particular defending it from foreign interference. So a thriving civic space is really an important pillar for a healthy democracy, and civil society actors, they have an important role in the promotion and protecting of the democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental rights. And they also amplify and empower citizens and people around Europe to bring up their concerns and the needs in society. At the same time, they can be an important ally for parliaments, in particular for the European Parliament, to hold institutions and governments accountable and play a watchdog role. But we've seen increasing challenges for civil society at national level, in the European Union, to contribute to policy making. In particular, we've seen an increase of threats and attacks to human rights defenders, civil society activists, an increase in legal and administrative barriers, and also more difficulties in access to funding and less openness of the decision-making process and of institutions in general. And all this is documented, for instance, in the rule of law reports, but has also been raised by European Parliament resolutions and by recent documents from the European Commission, and also by the conclusions of the Council of the European Union. So in the framework of our European election campaign, Civil Society for the EU, we have trying to raise this issue on the role of civil society, and we have a manifesto which is supported by so far 182 organizations at European and national level, which is open also for endorsement by further civil society organizations. It's also possible to join the campaign, and also possible to display your campaign within our campaign, because we want to connect all civil society organizations campaign together. And we, in this context of the debate, we want to actually discuss what are the views of the main political parties on the links to threats to democracy and shrinking civic space in view of the elections, and in the context also of this debate about risk of interference and increasing polarization, but also to see practically what is the parties' visions of what can be done in order to protect and promote the role of civil society and how to counter civic space. I would like also to thank the speakers, the representatives of the political parties, all the leaders that are joining us today. Unfortunately, the Secretary General of the European People's Party was unable to come due to previous commitments. And also, I would like to thank our supporters for the campaign, who enable us to organize this and the campaign in general. So Foundation Civitates, but also the European Union through the SERVE program. So we will have 2 rounds of discussions with the speakers here, and then I also invite you all to put your comments and questions in the chat, and which we will take into account for the final part of the discussion. So I would like to present to you and thank again the speakers to this open debate. So Benedetta De Marte, who is the Secretary General of the European Green Party, welcome. Diederik de Schatzen, who is the Secretary General of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe. Giacomo Filibeck, Secretary General of the Party of the European Socialists, and Walter Bayer, who is the President of the Party of the European Left. So welcome to all. And without further ado, actually, I will start to ask you a question. So my first question is I will start with Benedetta. My first question is if you can give us a little bit your view on the current state of play of threats to democracy and the rule of law in the EU. And if you can tell us a bit what are the risks that you see, or maybe even opportunities that you see in view of the upcoming elections. Thank you, Benedetta. The floor is.
Thank you, Carlotta, and nice to see you all. And thank you very much for this invitation, which is very appreciated on the side of the European Greens. As always, I unfortunately am the only woman representing political parties, which is a sad observation that I have to do at all debates to which I am invited with other political forces, but I'm very glad that at least Carlotta is here with me to accompany the female part of this debate. I would like to start by saying that indeed, I think as never before, maybe in the last decades, we see a lot of dangers for democracy, not only in the world, of course, where unfortunately the observation is that democracy and number of democratic countries is unfortunately shrinking and democracy is being deteriorated. But and this is the topic of our debate also in Europe and inside the European Union. So it is something that it is absolutely worrying, and for which we can provide many examples that do not only relate to the usual, let's say, suspects that we point and we have been pointing fingers to in the last years, like Hungary, where the rule of law and democracy continue to be under very severe threat, but unfortunately enlarges also to other countries, not only where the far right, as in Italy, is in government and doesn't avoid any occasion to prevaricate and show, let's say, the power they want to exert and the deterioration of democracy they are looking at, but also in some countries that are considered to be more, let's say, governed by more democratic or liberal forces. As we have seen, for example, with the provision of some protests regarding Palestine in the last months, for example, or as we can see when, for example, we witnessed many attacks against climate activists, while when it is other public that protest, as recently farmers in several European countries and also far-right forces, we see a much lighter, let's say, approach from the authorities. So this is a very worrying sign also of differentiated approach towards different protests, and that's something that we consider very worrying. We have seen in Italy, for example, lately that a man who dared to say long life to Italian anti-fascism was identified very quickly by the police in Teatro La Scala, while these hundreds of people doing Nazi-fascist salutations lately in the streets of Rome have been, of course, been left going with impunity, let's say, and only a few days later, some of them were identified. So just to say that this is the situation is worrying. Of course, it's not maybe degenerating yet, but this is the country and the picture that we are seeing in Europe. And for us, this is, and not to mention even the persecution against NGOs, rescue and saving NGOs in the Mediterranean, because that's another chapter which we can talk about for hours. So this is the picture that we see, and this is worrying, and that's why as Greens we are very, very committed to strengthen our ties with the civil society, which we're already very strong and have always been very, very strong. But in view of these next elections, we have made even further efforts to consult and listen to the civil society through our manifesto process. For example, we have been organizing a listening process with more than 150 civil society organizations twice, in order to make sure that also our goals will be very aligned in many aspects and on many policies. And that's why we are committing very strongly also on disinformation, hate speech, let's say shrinking space for democracy and for activism, dialogue, civil dialogue, structuring. We can talk about it probably in the second part of the debate. But yes, in general, we feel that the opportunity of these European elections, it is to make sure that there is a huge mobilization against the threats that we see in Europe today. The Eurobarometer that you just mentioned, Carlotta, is something that struck me as well, for the numbers of support of European citizens to the defense of democracy, and that I consider very important in view of the next European elections, because it means that citizens observe this deterioration and they want to act. So the role of the civil society in this is key, because, you know, we all know how mobilizing power they have. I maybe stop here because I think I spoke 4.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Benedetta. And I will turn also to Diederik, and maybe you can tell us if you also have the same view within your party. And yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to speak after Benedetta. I think since 4 or 5 years, I said I'll never join a panel with only men. So Benedetta, thanks to you, I'm here. Or maybe not thanks to you, but without you, I wouldn't have attended. So I fully share your point there. I'm not going to tell you civil society is important. Civil society is essential. It's a trio. EPP is not there. I think they could have said maybe, but they're not there. It's a bit of a trinity where you have politics, you've got the business sphere, but civil society is essential. And we notice, I would argue in our political family, we have quite a lot, even some civil society movements that become political parties. I think especially in Hungary, we have that in Slovakia too. And we've seen with the recent crises we faced, be it Ukraine, be it the pandemic, is that the role of civil society is maybe more than politics now a way to change the world. I think several of us want to change the world. In our case, we're very focused on changing and reforming EU. And there are several ways to do that. Politics is one, but engaging in civil society is another one. And I think, and that I can't back up by studies, but I have the impression that there's a lot of involvement, and probably more involvement now in civil society than in politics, so that there's even a bigger role and a bigger necessity to cooperate. And I think it's a little bit close to our DNA as a political party. And I think maybe as an example, our manifesto. Our manifesto was really open, well, definitely to civil society, but also to individuals. We crossed Europe with town halls where we invited people, some experts on some issues to contribute. I think a couple of your members participated too. We work a bit more with the Youth Forum also and the European Women's Lobby. But I think all these contributions just participate to better policy, to better ambitions. So voilà, you're not essential, you're not an important part, you're just you're not just important, you are one of the core elements. What we are trying to do, and maybe if I have to prioritize this, is we need civil society mostly to really slash corruption and the mishandling of power. Benedetta briefly mentioned Hungary. None of us is excited about what's happening, and no rule of law, no money, no European money should be the praxis. So this is something that is really an element of concern. I think we also realized that we need to bring back trust. I think it was a debate of Benedetta and Giacomo were maybe participating, where people say, well, I don't feel it's such an issue, the element of the current scandals we had. I think it has really hurt us, and we're going a couple of step backs. We have to build trust again, and that is really important. And then something you'll hear often from us, but we're not going to change, is that there is a need to reform the institutions, to make it more efficient and more transparent. This element of a veto in the council, it's just, I mean, it's so obvious it's not working that some solutions have to be found there, and will continue. So these are, in short, 3 points where, if we don't have the backing, the support of our third pillar, civil society, then there's no way we can implement any of these things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks also to both you, Benedetta and Diederik, for mentioning also this consultation with civil society, to whom we have also participated, also through the campaign and also through the different organizations. Maybe turning to Giacomo, I would like also to maybe follow up on the same question, but also the issue that was raised about a bit the balance, I think, between the defending our democracy, but also preserving the openness of the institutions, and also in the parliament. So maybe you can comment generally, respond to the question, and maybe bear this in mind. Thank you very much. Sorry, yeah, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes, I was very diligent in putting mute on my while the others were speaking, and I forgot to turn it on. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for organizing this panel. As the composition of the panel in itself is also a political issue, as Benedetta rightly pointed out at the very beginning, for lack of full gender parity, if you want, among the leadership of the political families. I would also allow myself to say that it is unfortunate that our friend from the EPP is not present here today to discuss with us. But I would say that even more importantly, we should engage those other political families that are rarely involved in our circle of debate among the main political families. I'm referring to those very political forces that we criticize strongly, precisely for their policies when they are in government, against the very notion of an open and strengthened civil society in their countries. Because when it comes to the EPP, I'm fully confident of the democratic credential of our colleague, the Secretary General of the party. I am not fully confident on some of the member parties of the EPP that with their complacency, with their openness, and with their willingness to cooperate with radical right-wing nationalist political movements, have de facto contributed to bring down the level of democratic tools within some European countries. This is very concerning. But again, I think we should involve the leadership of the other groups, the other political parties, because we need to engage and expose them to the wrongdoing that, in the context of rule of law, freedom of the press, democratic participation, active citizenship, and all the set of tools that a vibrant civil society can represent in our communities mean to all of us. So I would just like to really reiterate some of the messages that the previous two speakers have already stated, but it is important that I do it on behalf of PES. And also for a personal history. I have been in a previous life in the leadership of the European Youth Forum, which was the youth platform of civil society, youth NGOs. So I spent many years trying to represent their requests, their demands, their needs, and try to make sure that their voice was heard at the level of the European Union. And if you are a member of the European Union, if you represent a member state of the European Union, you cannot violate fundamental rights and the rule of law and call yourself still a pro-EU government. You cannot undermine democracy and call yourself a democrat itself. And you cannot continue to shrink the civic space and call yourself as a political movement that represents citizens, because these are contradictions in terms. And our task is to fight it. These European elections that is upcoming will be seriously about the destiny of the European integration project, I believe. And I think that all this debate that has started about Hungary and Article 7, because they are blocking the financing of our help for Ukraine, it's signaling that for some years we have been maybe shy or a bit blind, because it can not only be because of the support that we really need to give to the Ukrainians, that we should try to strip their voting rights in order to marginalize them and to make them inoffensive within the way the European Union decision-making works. We should have done this before. We should have done this when they have been neglecting plurality of media in Hungary. We should have done it when they have been de facto bent the judiciary power for the benefit of the political elite that run the countries under the Viktor Orban regime. Hungary de facto is, I cannot, in all honesty, call it a functional democracy, because it is not. And they are still a member of the European Union. Now, if we see, and I conclude, the example that we are giving also outside of the membership of the European Union, we see that some applying countries to our union, they are not shy either in behaving similarly to the way Viktor Orban does, because they see it's possible. I'm referring to the Serbian government and the elections that just took place a few weeks ago. It is really worrying because it is the credibility of our own project that is at stake. If we do not manage to be credible within our own union, how can we carry the flag of democracy, of all the values that were at the basis of our integration project? How can we make this strong and alive for the younger generation that are living in this time of uncertainties? This, I believe, is the task that we have ahead in the European election campaign. And I believe that as PES, we will focus a lot on that in the upcoming months.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. Walter, you've heard also that the issue of Hungary, obviously also after yesterday's vote at the European Parliament, is coming up a lot. But maybe you can tell us a little bit the views of your party on the general state of play of democracy also beyond, and what are your priorities there? You have to unmute yourself, I think.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate this opportunity for a dialogue very much. And I agree with what was said about having also the colleagues from the EPP in our panel, because it would worth to ask them how come that democratic parties more or less now open the gates for cooperation with far-right parties. I would also like to ask my French colleagues how come that in the French Parliament and National Assembly the Macron majority together with the far right adopted immigration law, which is shameful, really shameful for the entirety of the European Union, and politically harmful in the way that it normalizes, it banalizes the threat which is coming from the far right. So I would say there is a lot of dialogue required in this respect. I think indeed democracy is in a state of emergency. If I should explain, so to say, the particularity of our point of view on the issue, I would emphasize two aspects. One aspect is no compromise, no compromise on values, on human rights, on rights for migrants, on tolerance, authoritarianism. All these things, we must be clear. And the idea of fighting the far right by partially integrating their agenda in the agenda of the so-called normal center is a catastrophic decision. And secondly, I would like that we are a little bit more humble in the discussion, because the rise of the far right actually has to do with the social situation in our countries. 80%, according to Eurobarometer, are concerned about the cost of living crisis, are concerned about the future of themselves and of their kids. We have a crisis of houses, and fighting the rise of the far right, in our opinion, requires a strong and determined social agenda, meaning people have the right for a dignified life, and politics have to deliver this. And if politics don't deliver, that opens the floodgates for the far right. This is the situation. And that's why we should not be too self-confident if we are not able to address the social worries and the economic worries of large sectors of our societies. And finally, I would add one aspect which also has to do with democracy and the state of democracy. Benedetta rightly pointed to the, so to say, biased composition of our panel. But of course, it's not only about the panel, it is about the situation of our societies. Democracy starts on the workplaces, democracy starts with the access to public services, democracy starts with the representation of women. All this is required. And if we live in states in which, like in Austria, 5% of the population own 50% of the wealth, what kind of democracy is this? Or if we have a situation in which 5 or 6 families, companies, own more than 50% of the media outlets, all these are aspects which harm the image and the credibility of democracy, and this must be changed. So what I want to say basically is, if we want to fight the far right, we have to do a lot of homework in social and political aspects concerning the realities of our societies.
Thank you very much. Indeed, one of the issues related to to the spread of the far right are also linked to the attacks to civil society. And in this context, in this second round of questions, I would like to focus a bit in the proposals that we included in our manifesto for a civil society strategy and for an agreement at EU level on civil dialogue, civil society strategy, also including measures to protect human rights defenders. And I see also that there are in the chat there are a number of comments about, for example, a recent vote at the European Parliament and so on a resolution that was sort of attacked also on civil society. So I would like, first of all, to ask maybe to come back also to Giacomo on this, if you can tell us what is the view of your party about the manifesto and about the measures that are necessary to support the role of civil society, and what can be done also by political parties in order to prevent and fight back when there are attacks on civil society. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I would, before proceeding with the answer, I would like to share with you some quick figures from our consultation process that illustrates that also ourselves at PES are very eager to make sure that civil society organizations are involved in the shaping of our own policy proposals. We reached out in the past months more than 270 organizations with a wide range of different focuses. We received feedback from over 110 organizations, amounting to 550 policy priorities and measures that we have somehow we are incorporating in our own documents. We have already met in person with more than 80 organizations so far in Brussels and in Europe. And with our third round of consultation later this month, we will once again trying to reach the broadest range of representatives from civil society. What I would also like to say, though, is that, and this starts to answer the question, is that the partnership with civil society cannot be something that you do only electorally. It cannot something that happens only during election time. It has to be a long-term partnership between political parties that believes that civil society plays an important role and that constantly involve them together with the trade unions in our meetings, in our gatherings. It's something that should be part, at least it is part for PES of our daily practice. We consider this a truly strategic partnership. And that's why it is imperative that we recognize the central role that civil society can play in safeguarding democratic societies. Those organizations from the civil society world are the bedrock of democracy, advocacy, and social progress. They act as a bridge between elected representatives and very often neglected groups, trying to ensure that fundamental rights are reflected in policies at the European level and that those marginalized groups have a voice and are represented. They also work tirelessly to build the active citizenship that is essential to the functioning of good democracies. And to ensure that all of this can continue, we will push for policies that protect and strengthen it. And we will support the increased and real involvement of civil society in policymaking process, as you call for in your own manifesto. I would just like to point out a few bullet points of what we have adopted in our own Congress resolution in Malaga in November 2023. which serve as a basis of our manifesto that will be adopted at the Congress in Rome on the 1st and 2nd of March. First point is that we want to promote active participatory citizenship that recognizes the value of engaging with civil society at all levels and in all institutions, and reverse the trend of shrinking civic space by strengthening the recognition, protection, and engagement of civil society actors. We want to play a leading role in shaping the forthcoming democracy package to ensure that it is in line with our values. Civil society must be supported and celebrated, not restricted and stigmatized, because protecting and promoting democracy means protecting and promoting civil society itself. And then we need to see that the newly agreed anti-SLAPP directive is implemented to protect civil society activists and like-minded actors as free media journalists. All of these are just a few points that I hope represent and explain how much aligned we can be in our way of looking at this debate. There is no healthy democracy if this partnership between politics, institutions, and civil society representative is not healthy, is not alive, is not vibrant. So we will keep fighting for this at the level of the European Union.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. Yeah, I would like to ask also the same question to Dietrich. And I see also a comment on the chat linked to that says that civil society is always framed by EU institutions as a passive and receptive space rather than an active contribution to policy making, and that parties should recognize the power of citizens in civil society. So maybe that's a good question. That thank you.
It's funny. I had spotted that comment from Martina too, and I think that's what I meant in my intro, where I don't want to say that civil society is important. It's much more than that. So Martina, I fully agree. It's not a nice thing to have or a better way to make policy. It's just essential, and you cannot make policy without the input. So that is a very valid point. I'll have to apologize, as you know, Carlotta, that I will have to leave a bit quicker. But of the things I really want to say, maybe on the good news first, is that I've read your manifesto. Okay, maybe it was a bit linked to the fact that I was preparing for this one, but there are some matches in your civil society strategy. I think I mentioned it before, but you know that in our manifesto that hasn't been adopted yet, so you get a scoop here. But we do have in our section on reform of the institutions is really an element of protecting obviously the right to association and assembly, but really to protect civil society. And this links to a point which was, I think it's called Hilmi, or that it's also, there was one, yeah, on often also on LGBTI associations that are often one of the first indicators of when they attack civil society. It's often that way that you can see how the extremes are trying to take over civil society. And I think that is why, yeah, it was Aisling Rady, I see now. And so I think, yes, this is an indicator, a scary indicator, but it starts with attacking minorities, the LGBTIQ community, and that is when it's nearly too late, but that is when really actions are definitely needed. I like the element of a civil dialogue agreement. There, I have to say that there have been initiatives before. It's not always been super successful. I'm thinking about initiative, even petitions but I think we shouldn't give up. And I think one of the approaches there is indeed, let's use the tools that are existing. And maybe these elements of civil society, sorry, I forgot the name, which is why it's the new legislation allowing us to submit questions to the Commission. Disregarding, what I meant to say is that there are some tools there. They're not perfect yet. In your manifesto, you come with proposals. But maybe as a way of concluding this particular part, just like we care about, and I think it's what Walter said too, just like we care about gender representation, as we did at the beginning, we should care about political representation to make sure our political opponents are also at these discussions now. We should always make sure that systematically a representation by civil society. I think this kind of answered the question, Carlotta. I'm sorry if I switched a bit outside. And again, I'll apologize that I'll have to leave a bit earlier.
Thank you, Diederik. And indeed, Walter, maybe it's your turn to address this question, and also maybe if you have a concrete proposal of how to bridge the gap between citizens and the political parties, but also citizens as in their collective engagement. Often, I mean, the Commission always, somehow we see recently that there is a lot of focus on individual participation of citizens on a very short term, but we would like, citizens and people at large in Europe to be more engaged through also their collective and in a long term. So what are your concrete proposals there? Please unmute yourself.
Julie in the chat said that the manifestos are weak in addressing the issue of racism. I was not aware of that, but as far as the manifesto which the European Left Party will publish soon is concerned, we are very strong in this regard. There is no space for compromising about human rights of the refugees, about the respective UN conventions. First of all, it's about humans, and secondly, it is one of the barriers against the far right. Secondly, I want to say that, and of course this applies particularly and also for the LGBTQ rights as well. When it goes against minorities, it's the first step of depriving the majority of democratic rights. Generally saying, I believe that civil society is the oxygen of politics, and we need more oxygen. That's why we support your agenda on creating safe spaces, on defending people who stand up for civic rights and human rights, on creating dialogues and urging the European institutions for a more decided and determined approach. Since I should talk about the particularity of our point of view, I believe that civic society is the most important instrument giving voice to those people who don't have voice in the political play. And to a large extent, these are the socially and economically disadvantaged. So I would like to see civil society being very much engaged in the struggle for the rights of the disadvantaged. Last week, I met the Pope in Rome in a private audience, and he also addressed this issue that the criteria of politics is to listen to the cry of the poor and to listen to the cry of the earth. This is the challenge for both the institutionalized politics and civil society. And finally, I would like to address your question: how can this connection between politics and civil society can become vivid? I strongly believe in two things. One thing is we need an understanding of politics, that politics has to serve the people. That means politicians have to listen, politicians have to be responsive, and politicians have to be humble. And secondly, I think that the way in which civil society mostly can affect politics is social movement. That's why in our consultation process, we were very much attentive to listen to the social movements, to the anti-poverty network, to the trade unions, which play a very, very decisive role in defending the rights of the people and also in defending democracy. So I would wish that civil society understands itself more also as an instrument of mobilizing people, of creating pressure. And by the way, if we had more pressure, we could more easily change, for example, attitudes which exist in the People's Party and also in some liberal circles towards the radical right. Organizations which are dealing with refugees, for example, play an immense role in fencing in the far right and not allowing them to intrude even civil society.
Thank you very much also for presenting the challenges for which civil society works on, and of course the importance of different forms of civil society. And yes, turning to Benedetta, actually, I would like also to have your view on concrete proposals, actually, to make sure that that civil society can be really heard and listened to. We speak about civil dialogue, for instance, and also make sure, somebody in the chat also said we have to make sure that this value of civil society is not just seen as an important value by party leaders, but permeates throughout the party and their representatives. And maybe also because I know you've been in one of the issues that came at the beginning of the chat about the adoption of the People's Report, maybe you can also come back on that and what you think happened in the parliament and how we can prevent that in the future. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Carlotta. You touched upon many of the things that indeed I wanted to comment on after also seeing this very lively chat. I also think indeed that one thing is what you write in your manifesto, and then the other one is how you follow up with legislative action. So when it comes to our manifesto, I think I will not spend a lot of time because our policies are super aligned with the manifesto of the Civil Society Europe in terms of civil society dialogue, also EU mechanism to defend activists and civil society, and so on, funding issues, reporting of the harassment in a dedicated way. So we have a lot of policies in common. Policy proposals, which I think stem also from the fact that the Greens, I don't know how to say, already have the structured dialogue with the civil society that we wish to extend at the institutional level, but we already have it both in the parliament and at party level, of course, in respect of our specific roles, but we have a very strong link. So that's why I think also our manifestos are very aligned, and also the policies of our parties at national level are very aligned when it comes to this. But indeed, as I was saying, one thing is what we say and one thing is what we do. And I wanted to comment on the People report and on the absence of EPP here today without wanting to be too nice. I think this report was a scandal since the very beginning. We managed to push back in 2017. This year, we didn't manage to push back, and unfortunately, it has been adopted. You know, the Greens, we are never unconstructive, so we tried in the parliament to improve the report as much as we could. And I think a lot of things have been achieved also thanks to the cooperation with colleagues from the left, the socialists, and the liberals to a certain extent, to try to really decrease the stigma that this report wanted to put on the civil society and on NGOs in the original intentions of the EPP. But of course, still we found it impossible to vote in favor of, which I cannot say the same for some of the colleagues and some of the groups that are here today represented by their respective political parties, and we think it's a pity that in the end this week it's been adopted. We of course voted against, also indeed in a strong cooperation with the civil society. We tried to make amendments, many of them passed, so we are happy that at least we managed to avoid the worst, but we are very worried also. And this links me to something else. And this links me to what Giacomo also said at the beginning about being sure that EPP is, like vowing and working in favor of democracy and sticking to the same values we stick to. Well, if I read their leaked manifesto and how it starts on migration, and how they have been behaving in many national countries where they are really facilitating the arrival of the far right in power and making it possible. And I'm sorry to say, this is also the case for some of our liberal friends, because we also have to point fingers where it hurts. I'm not sure. And I'm not sure. And then allows me to also touch a little bit on migration, which I think it's at the core of our preoccupations as well. As Greens, you know that we did always our best. Indeed, also on the Migration Pact, we didn't shy away from trying to make it better, always with the same constructive approach I was saying at the beginning. But we are super, super worried. I cannot preempt the vote of my political group, but for sure, as European Green Party, we are very, very, very preoccupied. We are very preoccupied by, indeed, these tendencies also within EPP, but also to a certain extent in other political family of criminalizing migration, criminalizing the NGOs. And for us, it's a priority to instead really recognizing their role, acknowledging that they are actually playing the role that the public should play and that states and the European Union should play. So yes, I just wanted to react on a couple of things that I had seen in the chat. Of course, I agree with a lot of what my colleagues said about also, the fact that today social inequalities and the fact that a part of the society, it is excluded by decision makers. The representativity issue is also a very big one in our society, and it's a huge one that we have to tackle as well. So like exclusion through social inequalities, but also exclusion because you belong to minorities or diversity. It's a major issue, and again, it's a place where the civil society can help us continuously to make sure that we bridge this gap that there is between decision makers and the citizens. And that's why we should really strengthen their role. And that's why also indeed what the European Greens will do and have always been doing, but will continue to do, is to strive to make the role of the civil society both in Europe and at national level stronger and stronger, instead of weakening it by adopting reports as the one that unfortunately we have seen adopted in the last week in Strasbourg. And I'm sorry, I would have loved to speak even more, but indeed we are coming to an end.
Yes, indeed, we are coming to an end. Maybe I can ask each of you to give a key word about what is needed next from your side, key initiative for civil society. Maybe starting with Walter. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's for the third time that I started muted. Yes, if you ask me what would be the next initiative, it would be supporting civil society movements against the far right and in solidarity with the migrants.
Okay, thank you. Giacomo?
As I said, our partnership is something that has to go beyond the electoral time. And we believe that it's only through a permanent dialogue, that we empower civil society organization to have an impact in policy making. This, I think, it's a task that we need to continue perform at the level of the Party of the European Socialists.
Thank you very much. Benedetta, your last word.
Yes, once again, I believe our next common and joint fight must be the one of mobilizing the society towards the next European elections. I really think that together we can mobilize a massive movement of people to vote for democratic and progressive forces. So I hope that with these last words, I can invite you to really support in this all together.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers today for this very interesting lively debate. Thanks to all the participants also for the very interesting questions and comments that you put in the chat, and for your participation. On behalf of the social platform and Civil Society Europe, who are coordinating the Civil Society for EU campaign. So we hope we will continue within that campaign this discussion. Hope to see also all the what we heard from the political parties reflected in their manifesto and future activities towards the election campaign, their election campaign. So with that, I would like to wish you a very nice day, and thanks again for being with us for this discussion, which I believe is the first discussion we had with civil society. So we were very pleased to have you all here with us. So thank you again, Benedetta, Giacomo, and Walter, and also thank you to Diederik, who had to leave a few minutes earlier. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.